Hello and welcome to Choice of Robots by Kevin Gold, which is a text-based game that is kind of like a novel where you can make your own choices. What I kind of like already from this stuff, you've got a text-based menu as well, where if you want to make the text bigger or smaller, you have to click for a menu, then do it like this. It's kind of has its own charm. Anyway, it's as far as I'm aware, it's not a long game. Should be about 2 hours, 2.5 hours maybe. Well, probably a bit longer since I'm reading everything, so maybe 3. I'm not quite sure how long the parts are going to be yet. It will probably depend on whether there's clear cut-off points. Otherwise, probably the standard 20-30 minutes. But we'll see. Our first choice is already at the beginning here. Where are we? We could be either in the court of the Egyptian god Anubis, answering for our sins. We could be on a war-torn battlefield with a robotic Statue of Liberty, on a cliff and island watching the sunset with a robot companion, or on a utopian beach ruled by a godlike cloud of robots. The fourth choice seems a bit too abstract for me. It's difficult to say. I kind of like 1 and 3. I'm not too much of a fan of war-torn battlefields. You know what? We'll go to Ireland. I like Ireland. Sitting on a seaside cliff in Ireland watching the sunset is the robot companion you always wanted. Sure, he and I travelled the world together exploring. Yes, you two are the best of friends. Plus empathy, plus autonomy. He's clothed in a loose-fitting red tunic and he shoots you a packish-friendly look. You sit down beside him to watch the sun together. I hope I didn't keep you waiting, you say. Actually, I'm still waiting, he says with a slight smile, for you to build me. I can do that, you say. He looks sad for a moment. Yes, but it will take a lot out of you. He puts his hand on yours. But I promise you that if you give your humanity to me, then I will give it back one day. I don't understand, you say. Just remember that no great thing happens without sacrifice, he says. And I'm sorry. Some things are in our control and others not. Epictetus. Chapter 1. Assembly. You awaken with your head on a desktop keyboard. Your 3D drafting program is still open, the schematic zoomed into the recess where your smartphone will snap into its back to act as its brain. You recall fiddling with that part endlessly last night until finally your vision began to fade. There was a roaring in your ears and you realized you had been working far, far too long. You must have passed out. It's the fall of 2019. You're a 24-year-old graduate student in a PhD program in computer science at Stanford. And you're a guy. Whose name is... Here, I'll type it for you. There you go. Calamity, yeah. And your last name is... The exclamation point is a click. Sure. Yep. Or Calamity Kwan. People sometimes think your last name is a typo, but the exclamation point is in fact a click in the language of the Kung, your ancestors in Africa. Your parents chose a new last name after they married that would both reflect their heritage and irritate bureaucrats. Good choice. The click is pronounced by popping your tongue off the roof of your mouth. Like that, I'm going to assume. I don't know how you'd pronounce that while speaking, but we're going to figure it out. You look around your apartment. What does it look like? Battle bots, trophies, personal widescreen TV equipped with the latest video game console. Neatly labeled plastic shelving units sit on a 3D printer equipped robot workbench. Busts of famous philosophers sit next to my own attempts to sculpt them. Or my shelves display all of the strange little robotic creatures I've made over the years. We go with video game consoles. Yes, you're a competitive person by nature, and you grew interested in artificial intelligence by coding AI for games. When your high school fielded a team for a local BattleBots competition, sponsored by the nearby defense contractor, you eagerly took up the challenge and won with an aggressive bot that would ram the enemy bot while it was still figuring out where it was. You continued to compete at the college level. It strikes you for a moment that this kind of thinking about how your life affects your robots is second nature to you, though others might find it peculiar. You've always been fascinated by how every little detail of your life, from the content of your dreams to the decor of your room, changes the inputs to the robots you create, boosts their empathy or autonomy or grace or appeal to the military. Surely there are other things going on around you as a result of your decisions, but they don't immediately strike you in the same way. Today, your robot is foremost on your mind because you're about to build its body. You pick up your laptop and head for the Stanford machine shop. It's a beautiful spring day in Palo Alto, California, and your apartment is only a short walk from the machine shop. But the streets of Palo Alto are not designed for walking. You find yourself climbing around palm trees and balancing on narrow curbs as you do every day. You hear a low roar overhead. Glancing up, you see it's a flying car, a Nimbus. A little over $300,000 can buy you a car with wings that fold out so that it becomes a small sport plane. The red Nimbus looks sleek and sporty. It's the sort of car its owner takes religiously to the car wash. Though the commercials would have you believe you can fly anywhere you want in those cars, the FAA still requires them to take off and land from airports. Only here in wealthy Silicon Valley do you see them with any frequency. The first time you saw one, you couldn't quite believe the future had arrived so quickly. But the second time you saw one, you thought, if I ever make that much money, I'll use it to help the world instead of buying that car. Why aren't those flying cars driving themselves? Good point. Occasionally you see a self-driving car on the roads of Palo Alto, but for some reason they still haven't caught on quite as much as one would expect. Despite having been around at least as long as the flying cars, you've decided it's because people just don't trust self-driving cars enough. It's important to make your robots seem trustworthy. Intelligence alone doesn't instill trust. The Stanford University fabrication shop smells like oil and burnt plastic. The room is dominated by large metal hand-cranked milling machines and lathes, dinosaurs of the 20th century. While the most used machines are the smaller 3D printers and computer-controlled water jet cutters that take a quarter of the space. The lights have the sterile fluorescence of an operating room with only a single tiny window near the ceiling to inform you that it is day. You start up a National Police radio podcast on your laptop. You haven't seen your advisor much since you joined the lab, so you choose the episode in which he's the interviewee. My guest today is Dr. Harvey Siegler, says a woman with a soothing voice. That probably didn't sound anything like the voice I just did. Dr. Siegler, thank you for talking with us today. Well, a scientist does have some responsibility to inform the unwashed masses, Terry. You let the podcast run as you walk over to the 3D printers. What material have you decided to use for your robot? Well, a robot's gotta be out of metal, right? Wood is, in fact, the most pleasing to the hand and eye, but although... No, it would just wither away, wouldn't it? You gotta make it resistant. You walk over to the computer-controlled water jet cutter, where a helpful pictogram shows the jet of abrasive-filled water slicing a hand in two. Dr. Siegler, in your new book you talk about the singularity. Could you describe for our listeners what that is? Terry, the singularity is the coming time when artificial intelligences will have figured out how to make themselves, and us, smarter. Once that happens, the process will build on itself until the robots are smart enough to figure out how we can live forever. Is that possible? The interviewer asks. Living forever? Of course, Professor Siegler says. What does it matter whether our operating systems are made out of meat or silicon? So you're predicting we'll become robots? Not exactly, Ziegler says, but I do think the line between humans and robots will blur. You're hardly listening to the podcast because you're about to make your first robot part. What does the head of your robot look like? What does it look like? A Venetian mask? A ring of cameras around its head for a 360-degree view, felt covered in big eyes. Clearly not trying to be anything but a robot. You know what? Make it creepy. Make it a Venetian mask. The water jet cutter quickly cuts the face. The small nose, the dainty mouth, the large black holes where CCD panels will absorb all light. It takes somewhat longer to add the intricate metal frill that adds a corona to the mask. This is a robot that will command awe. Dr. Ziegler, what makes you think the singularity will happen now? Well, for one thing, I'm around, but seriously, my lab is taking a unique approach because we're saying, why not teach a robot like a child? We're going to equip the robot with the best senses money can buy and teach it English. Then it could rapidly teach itself using the internet. Well, that's annoying. Your advisor thought that a robot child was a stupid idea until you told him. Turing proposed it back in 1950, minus the internet part. But he isn't giving credit to you. He isn't giving credit to either of you. You keep working regardless. How will your robot get around? Crawl on 8 legs. Why not make a robot that looks as horrifying as possible? The 8 legs would probably work well for that. Kind of like that idea. 8 legs may give people the creeps, but they're much more stable than 2, and your robot will be able to explore more environments as a result. The water-jet cutter cuts the legs one by one. You use the basic hand-cranked milling machines to drill holes in the head for screws, since water-jet cutters aren't the best for threaded holes. And who is going to raise this robotic child? The interviewer asks. Who does all the grunt work in a research laboratory? Professor Ziegler says. The graduate students, of course. You find yourself wanting to reply to the podcast. You also do all of the real science. I think you'll learn sooner or later that getting funded to do real science requires a certain amount of management and salesmanship, says Professor Ziegler, who appears to have entered the machine shop behind you when you weren't looking. Professor Ziegler is a heavy-set man wearing a Hawaiian shirt and aviator sunglasses. He stalks over to your computer. We'll be back in a moment, continues the interviewer. We're talking with Professor. Professor Ziegler pauses the podcast by hitting your laptop spacebar, and you flinch at this intrusion. He then pulls a cigar from his pocket and lights it, and the smell of smoke mingles with the oily smell of the machine shop. I'm writing a grant for DARPA, and I need to see what you're making back here. We ultimately get funded by the Department of Defense, so we have to make sure they're happy with our product. He casts a critical eye on the work you've done so far. Metal's a good choice, Ziegler says. They want things that appear durable in the field. Professor Ziegler turns to examining your robot's head, which is currently sitting on the table next to the water jet cutter. Oh, that seems all right, Ziegler says. Looks like it could be sufficiently intimidating. What are you planning to do for arms and hands? Professor Ziegler says. No, it won't have T-Rex arms, although that would be quite frightening. Mechanical grippers, Swiss Army knife, soft hand with a good sense of touch. Lots of arms, sure, lots of arms. You know who Inspector Gadget is? Ziegler says incredulously. I saw reruns on the Cartoon Network website when I was young, you say. I love that show, Professor Ziegler says dreamily. But you know who the unsung hero of that show was? The Chief, who was accountable in the end for the Inspector's fuck-ups. The Chief, who got blown up by a self-destructing message every episode in the service of his country? The Chief, but nobody ever gave the Chief enough credit. An awkward silence follows while your advisor ponders the character of the Chief. Oh, achievement. Gadgeteer. Alright. Finally, he shakes off his reverie. You know, with that many degrees of freedom, the arms are very likely to crash into each other. If they try carrying anything, it'll be even more of a control problem nightmare. It's fine, you say. I've already come up with a solution to that. You uncrumple a piece of paper in your pocket with a bunch of equations and hand it to him. It's true that this would be difficult for an average student, but I think you'll find I'm not your average student. Professor Ziegler squints at your mathematics, then nods his head slowly. Fine, Ziegler says, waving away further explanation. Carry on, then. He turns to leave. I've got to take a call from a New York Times reporter. Funny how journalists all copy each other's stories, but each garble the message in a unique way. He makes it to the door, then turns and says, Oh, one more thing. Do you think your robot can be ready by tomorrow? Someone from the Air Force will be in town, and I told her your robot might be ready to show off by then. You feel your phone vibrating in your pocket. Bad timing. You resist the urge to check it while talking to your advisor, but it's probably someone with a better offer for what to do tonight. The robot will be done, but the demo will be out of the question. We need to test first. Professor Ziegler grudgingly nods. I can see the logic of that. Maybe we'll just send her a demo video, then it only has to work once. Professor Ziegler turns and walks out of the machine shop. You find yourself unclenching your hands. Who was calling you while Professor Ziegler was talking to you? Either Ellie Lau, a user experience designer and supportive friend, Eiji Aomame, a manga artist and generally a good guy, or my ambitious friend Josh Anderson, founder of the startup US Robots. We'll take a call of US Robots, user designer, Ellie. From the missed call, your phone is displaying Ellie's profile photo. It's a picture of Josh and Ellie from the freshman welcome week dance 7 years ago. Ellie is wearing a red Chinese dress with gold trim, her long straight black hair falling down to the what? Epaulets? The flash is too bright in the picture, making Ellie's pale skin look washed out. Josh is wearing his usual grey hoodie, not having bothered to dress up for the dance, and his arm is around Ellie. What is the story behind that picture? That's great. Yep, I was testing a music recognition algorithm when those two started bothering me. You had actually come to the dance just to try out your music recognition algorithm in a congested social environment with poor acoustics when those two, who were on some kind of date you guess, came up and started bothering you. Ellie asked you some technical questions about your senses, and Josh said that if you ever wanted to create a startup around your algorithm, you should contact him. You told him the algorithm was trivial and not really worth starting a business about. They both seemed impressed with you despite your standoffish behavior, and you agreed to exchange contact information, then shoot them away. They've both since tried to get you to come out of your shell a little more, but you like your shell. It gives you space in which to think. For example, thanks to your efforts that day, the robots you make are often able to pick up on subtle cues in the music of speech, called prosody, even in noisy environments. You notice that Ellie also left you a text. Ellie wants to meet for dinner at a jazz and sushi place in San Francisco, which is about an hour north of you. She also has tickets to a rendition of the musical Pippin, in which most of the characters are robots. Sounds like a date. That's a little terrifying. You text back. Sure. You want to come by tomorrow, see the robot? Okay, sure, is the response. This probably isn't Ellie's preferred way to see you, but you really want to work on your robot tonight. You spent the rest of the day drilling holes, polishing surfaces, cutting parts, and screwing things together. When you're done, your robot's body stands before you, a metal, 8-legged robot with a mask head and Inspector Gadget arms. The whole thing is about 3 feet tall. 3 feet, that's about a meter, isn't it? So, maybe slightly higher than I expected it to be with 8 legs, but sure. Alright. What will we name a robot? I mean, with 8 legs, right? Gotta be. Yeah, sure. We'll take Arachne. You name your 8-legged robot after that great weaver Arachne, hoping its grace will likewise make the gods envious. Now that Arachne has a body, it might be time to treat Arachne more like a person. With what pronouns will you refer to Arachne? Re, rur, and rim. No, certainly not. It is just fine. It's not human. People shouldn't get too attached to robots, you reason. They're specifically built for tasks that people don't want to do. You look on Arachne's 3-foot-tall, 8-legged body with satisfaction. Now all it needs are motors and a mind. The motors will have to wait for tomorrow, but you've spent years in graduate school writing the code that would form its robot's mind. You can hardly wait to try it out. You head back to your apartment where you spend several hours working on the final touches to Arachne's natural language processing code. What language do you program your robots in? C++, Python, Go, or Java? Everybody uses Java. I don't like C++. But it's the only one I've got some experience in. I don't know. The only one I don't think I've ever seen is Go. But screw it. Let's use Python. The existence of Python's natural language toolkit made Python the clear choice for your robots. The right word can change the course of history. Your robot should understand the importance of using the right one. With fewer parentheses and more recognizable words than other languages, your code itself looks a little like poetry. With the code done, you then briefly add just enough motors to allow Arachne to explore your room. It's a quick job, you'll do more of a thorough one tomorrow. Your smartphone won't have much power for the motors right now anyway. Finally, you upload the code to your smartphone and plug it into Arachne's back. You touch the icon labeled Arachne and a big red button fills the screen. Your finger hovers over the button. You probably want the first word Arachne learns to be significant somehow. What is the first thing Arachne will see when you power it on? In front of a mirror. That would be probably terrifying to the robot. I will start Arachne looking out the window and I will just start naming things. That sounds fun. Sure. You place Arachne at the window looking outside and hit the big red button. You begin pointing to things. Tree, car, person, flower, grass. Tree, car, person, flower, grass. Arachne says. It speaks in... well, which of these three fit the best to what I just did? One of the upper two. Probably a monotone, yeah. Accurate prosody is still hard, so you decided to avoid the problem by implementing a stereotypical robotic monotone for Arachne's voice. It's better, you think, if robots don't pretend to be something they're not. As you list off the things, Arachne crawls up to the window, pressing its masked head against the glass. You can tell it is itching to explore the great wide world, so full of things, and is a little frustrated by the glass separating it from it all. You then pick Arachne up and put it down in the center of the room to allow it to explore it well. But at first it simply seems overwhelmed by the possibilities. You decide to call this state... confusion, and then give Arachne a reassuringly straightforward order. Curiosity, allow Arachne to choose where to go, or loneliness, I stand further away to make the point. No, not that mean. Curiosity, go on. Curiosity, Arachne repeats. It crawls up to your closet and peeks inside. But it's something of a mess in there, and it quickly gets its 8-legged moving parts caught in your clothing. You pick Arachne up in your hands. It wriggles nervously. I got you, you say. You got me. It continues to wriggle. Stop. Your robot becomes still in your hands. You decide to teach it that the word for this state is... trust. Trust, Arachne repeats back as you set it on the ground. You have taught it to have a little faith that when a human does something it doesn't understand, things will turn out well. By now it is near midnight, and you have another busy day ahead of improving Arachne. You get ready for bed, leaving Arachne plugged into the wall with your cell phone charger. Stay there, you tell it. You can hear Arachne's motor revving on and off as you drift off to sleep. When you wake up, you find it in your closet, out of power, having escaped the power Tiva. You seem to have made yourself a curious, somewhat rebellious robot. You suppose that will make life interesting. And that's it for Chapter 1. I'll see you guys for Chapter 2.